Welcome to Hot Topics on the Edge of Show. I'm Richard Carthon. I'm here with my co-host, January Jones. Today, we're welcoming John Powler, a founder and chief executive steward of ETHDenver and founder of Opolis, a member-owned digital employment platform built on blockchain technology. Thanks for joining us, John.
Thanks for having me, guys. Good to see you.
You as well.
Coming up, the first official state crypto reserve is a go, and we'll double up on Ethereum news to talk about the new Pectra upgrade and ETH stablecoin domination, as well as get into some of the innovative projects that John is involved in and hear his perspective on where crypto is going next.
This is another production of The Edge of Company, a rapidly growing media ecosystem empowering the pioneers of Web3 technology, culture, and innovation. Let's jump in.
All right, well, kicking it off, we've been covering this race. New Hampshire has become the first U.S. state to allow its government to invest public funds directly in Bitcoin, capping holdings at 5% and setting strict eligibility and custody rules. Meanwhile, Arizona, who had their first bill vetoed, passed a different kind of Bitcoin reserve law, focusing only on managing unclaimed digital assets and related awards without permitting direct state investment in Bitcoin. So both states are leading this wave. They're showing a couple different models, but so far, Bitcoin is the only coin that qualifies for these large state reserves. John, what are you thinking about this? Do you think it's short-sighted for states to focus on only Bitcoin, or is this the only way they can manage risk in this market right now?
Well, I think it's just breaking the seal. Legislatively, you've got to take what you can get usually. And when you're talking about venturing into unknown territory, you've got to go where people are familiar. The ETFs did a similar thing where Bitcoin ETFs were the first thing. And now you've got Ethereum ETFs and you've got others being proposed. So I think it's just the beginning. I think it will become not just fashionable for states, but sovereign nations as well to be doing the same thing. So the race has begun and we're going to see who decides they want to keep up. The laggards, I think, are going to get left behind. So I wouldn't want to be Arizona at this point, but that's up to them. It's free markets. Like if they've got a governor who thinks that Bitcoin is a quote unproven asset, I don't know how you come up with that statement and actually look at the return curve over the past 10 years and with a straight face say that. So there's ulterior motives. There's politically driven motives there, I think, that are driving these decisions. But in the end, the markets will decide. And I think we're going to see a lot more to come over this summer.
Agreed. I think you brought up a lot of awesome points. And the one I want to double down on is if people our nations, sovereign nations, whomever don't get with what's coming in the world of Bitcoin, they're going to get left behind. Obviously, people have been saying this throughout the last several cycles. There's a point where you can get Bitcoin under $10. There's a point under 100, under 1,000. And now the new threshold is remember when you got Bitcoin under 100K at the time of this recording, Bitcoin is back above $100,000. And
last month it was 74.
Right. That's another 74. So that's wild. And in the grand scheme of where things potentially could be heading. But as states in the United States are making Bitcoin a reserve, and you look at this, there's several other states that are going to be doing this. It's not even just from a federal level, it's just individual states buying it up. You're going to have a shortage of liquid Bitcoin out in the market that you could actually get access to. So as this legislation comes out, they have to go get Bitcoin. So where do you get it from? The market. And so as more and more of this is being bought up, not just from a state level from the US, eventually, if the US eventually gets the Bitcoin reserve and they start getting their treasury ready to go and holding Bitcoin, that happens. And now you have all these other sovereign nations, like you have the UAE getting ready in talks of doing something like this, Hong Kong, Singapore, several others. As more and more starts to happen, there could be a pretty good access.
This is why people are saying that Bitcoin's $1 million by the end of the year. Some people are saying that. What do I know what other sovereign nations are really doing? I don't know. I don't have any visibility into that any more than the other average guy that's just looking at the news and following the cycles. But I think in theory, in principle, what you're seeing is free market economics coming into play where you have a limited supply and it's by code limited. So they can't just mint more. So price curves and demand curves for this are going to, if that legitimately happens, where you've got sovereign nations printing their own fiat essentially to go buy
Bitcoin.
Think about our treasury right now. We print trillions of dollars a year and we just inflate the money supply. what would have stopped our government from covertly buying up a bunch of Bitcoin and we don't even know about it? Now, let's say the US didn't do that, but what would stop any nation from doing that, aside from just fear of their own inflation or the devaluation of their own currency? Like, the US could do it, a bunch of countries could do it and hide it, right? So I'm not sure that you're even seeing everything that's going on. If I was a sovereign nation, I would quietly do it. I wouldn't tell anybody that I was doing it. It's a highly competitive thing. It's not a marketing thing, you know? Yeah, okay, New Hampshire's the first state to do it. That's a marketing thing, but who knows how long they've been doing it for? I don't know. If I'm the state lawmakers and I've got any discretion whatsoever to do that, and I don't need permission, like even on a small level, I would have been doing that. So I think the price action that we've seen even in the last month, today it went up a bunch again. This week it's been up a bunch again. I don't think we've even begun to see the beginning of what I think is a mega bull run on Bitcoin specifically. Now, there's discussions around value accrual to Ethereum and a bunch of other issues around other cryptos. But yeah, I think Bitcoin is the gold standard, so to speak, figuratively and metaphorically.
Yeah, they're tying it now to gold. Some countries are interested in doing that. One follow-up question, though. So we're talking about this at a mass institutional level. We also see these financial institutions buying in big, even universities, right? Where's that leave your average person who has been involved in crypto and is trying to get in on this? There is a limited supply. So are we also at some kind of a bit of a moral crisis as far as this idea of that for the people Bitcoin, right? Are we losing that when it's going at this scale?
Well, yeah, let's be honest. The only real use case that I see in the horizon for Bitcoin isn't going to be buying my coffee peer-to-peer. It's not peer-to-peer cashless transactions. It's not. It's replacing the US dollar as the world reserve currency is what it's going to do. And the US wants to be ahead of that because the US wants to hold as much of it as it can so that it can still maintain dominance, right? Because then he who has the gold makes the rules is the old saying. And this is the digital gold era, right? So what does it do to the average person? Yeah, Bitcoin is going to be for large nation states, governments, financial institutions as essentially the underpinning of the market. That's what it's going to become, in my opinion, based on the players that you see that are buying it, why they're buying it, what their behavior is going to be around owning it, which is primarily stockpiling and holding as reserves. You're not going to see Bitcoin, maybe aside from using Bitcoin to settle large transactions. And even then, I don't see why they can't just use some derivative of Bitcoin to settle these things with some other token, right? I think Bitcoin is going to become the gold standard, the new gold, the digital gold standard. It already is becoming that. And again, I think you're hearing in the news about 20% of what's really happening. So like, I think that the kind of news information release is delayed, and for good reason, because people have strategic interest in not telling everybody what they're doing all the time. So yeah, I think the average person you can own fractions of them. I think whoever got in early is going to be incentivized to sell out their Bitcoin at some point. You know, like honest question to you guys. If I came in today and you say you had a Bitcoin January that you bought for 20 grand. Okay, that's a big amount of money for you. And I offered you $20 million for that Bitcoin. Are you going to sell it to me?
Absolutely.
Yeah, you are.
But this is not financial advice.
Yeah, well, exactly. It's not financial advice. But hypothetically, an average person who has a Bitcoin who gets offered $20 million in today's value currency, that's generational money.
It's generational wealth. All of a sudden, yeah, agreed.
All of a sudden, overnight. Why would I not? Now, if I have 2 Bitcoins, I might sell one and keep one.
Yeah.
Or sell a half a Bitcoin or something. But you're definitely going to sell some of it. So the point is,
maybe that's
people who have them, it's going to consolidate. So yes, I think when you talk about the distribution of wealth curve, and we're going to see a huge distribution of wealth shift to early adopters. So the early adopters are going to get hyper wealthy, but then those that got in the middle are going to get reasonably wealthy. And then those that just never participated are going to be left on the sidelines, and they're not going to probably touch Bitcoin. They'll touch other cryptos. They'll probably be using USDC. They'll probably be using other things into the future. But yeah, they probably won't own a lot of Bitcoin. They'll own fractions of fractions of fractions. They'll own Satoshis at that point.
Yeah.
And that'll be where it goes.
And I guess just to put a button on it, like when you look at some of, just to answer your question around what does it mean for everyday person, I think there's still a lot of upside opportunity for people getting this. For where things are headed, we're still technically early. And ultimately, if this is digital gold, how many people do you know that just own gold? Not a lot. So when you get into the digital part, that's more people that can participate, but it also doesn't mean that everyone's going to get involved with it. But I think it goes to, when we think about the entire crypto market, like how do more people get involved? It's in the alt market, so it's Ethereum and everything else. And if I'm not mistaken, January, I think something new just happened on Ethereum. So let's dive into that a little bit more.
Yeah, definitely a big upgrade. Ethereum just launched its biggest upgrade since the merge in 2022 with Pectra. Pectra is supposed to help Ethereum compete with other fast-growing chains by directly addressing speed, cost, and usability areas, some places where Solana in particular has gained ground. Pectra increases the capacity of transaction, lowers fees, especially for layer twos, something a topic John has brought up in the past, and introduces smart accounts that let users pay gas fees in tokens other than ETH, as well as bundling multiple actions together, making wallets easier to use. So we're just a few days into the release. This is the hype about it. So John, without getting too technical and going into blobs and all the other details of the network, you've been in this space for many years. ETHDenver launched and then ETHDenver launched just a couple years after Ethereum even came out. So what do you think this means for Ethereum? How big a deal is this upgrade at this time and place now? Also, given the landscape of politics and reserve adoptions and all these other things that I know you have your finger on the pulse of.
Well, I think it's one step in the right direction, but by itself, it doesn't matter. I think Ethereum made a bet years ago that taking a research approach to Ethereum development and letting the L2s, the theory was that the L2s would accrue value to the main chain because they're using Ethereum, right? So Ethereum is benefiting by the use of L2s, but we've actually found that since the proof of stake launched, that Ethereum has lost parity with Bitcoin at about 75%. So it's not accruing value, and the token price is what it was 3 years ago. So what happened? Now, some people would say that this is a part of the natural sort of cycle of things, but I tend to think that what's the reality is L2's existence in the competitive landscape for transaction volume hasn't accrued value to the main chain as much as they would like. Now, things like base rollups and are much closer to the main chain, so I think that will help. But Ethereum actually incentivized its dismantling. Now, I don't want to, maybe dismantling is not the right word, but like when you talk about like where the game incentives and the economic incentives lie, the users are not accruing a lot of value to the main chain. At one point, it's like $1,000 a transaction to mint an NFT is something stupid like that back in 2021, 22. It's like, who's actually using the main chain? So the postulation was, well, in the future, using the main chain is going to be like a baller move, right? Because it's going to be very expensive to do business there, but it's not going to matter because all this sort of secondary layer stuff or this EVM stuff, all of this stuff is going to accrue value to the main chain. And that ended up not being true. Or at least it's not true in the way that I think people predicted it. And as a result, the price has come down a lot. Even from the beginning of the year, ETH was in the 3,000 range, and now it's around 2K right today. And it's been as low as $1,500, $1,600, which 4 years ago is where it was. Even in 2017, we got up to about $1,400. So it's not the whole ETH is sound money and all this kind of stuff. Like, I think, and there's discussion about this, that Ethereum needs to be less research-based and more product-based, which is what Solana is doing, which is what And that's really the only sort of, I wouldn't even say they're an ETH killer. They're not even a decentralized chain, right? They've made trade-offs to say usability, friendliness, speed at the expense of decentralization is the way to go. And then we'll figure out the decentralization thing later. This is not uncommon in the L2 world, but they've just done it as an L1. Now you're hearing like Arbitrum and Optimism and other and Base and other L2s. Some people are referring them to all L1s, right? Even though they're not really all L1s. So like, I think the Pectra upgrade is really important for Ethereum because it is addressing some of the issues that sort of make Ethereum not that usable for your average everyday person. But I think there's a larger thing this is part of that is going to that should get Ethereum back on track to be its dominant former self. Now, it may not happen. I'm not in charge of that. I'm a big Ethereum believer. I've been in the ecosystem for a decade. I'm not going anywhere, and I'm here out of ethos, not just because my bags are full, right? I care about decentralization. I care about the future of this tech as it relates to humanity and providing better opportunities to earn and to learn and to just have the lives that they choose. I think on-chain and the network state is the future, but it's just part of it. So yes, Pectra is very important. Socially, it's very important. And I think it's a step that, like I said, in the right direction. But the EF, which has also undergone some major changes, has a lot of work to do in shifting the priorities of the ecosystem from just research and maybe doing some interesting things that take a long time and actually getting an action plan and a more product-based approach that's putting usability in front of people so we can actually get to mass adoption, which is the goal.
Yeah. And I want to spend time on that final thought. And because my takeaway from this is you brought up interesting points around one, just the product itself of ETH and what was it actually trying to do and accomplish versus like price action. And so when it decided to go, like if they were truly focused on the tokenomics, price go up, everything else, they should have never left proof of work. Like going into proof of stake, they tried to go into a model that could then increase scalability and be able to have more and more things built on top of it. However, the way that they constructed it made it expensive and slow. And so then you had all these ETH killers come up or these L2s come up to try to help solve those problems. So by having this upgrade come in, they're directly addressing those things to go more into what you've been saying, which is focusing on the product. Why did less and less products keep building on ETH? It was too expensive. It was too slow. All these things. When you solve those immediate problems, and now you have a really good code base that people, EVM chain and everything else that you could build on top of, all of those, I won't say excuses, but reasons to go somewhere else disappear and gives you a reason to go back and actually work on the main chain itself. So I think they're trying to keep lowering those barrier to entries so that as products continue to spin up, that they work directly.
Yeah, again, I think the thesis around moving to proof of stake, they didn't anticipate that the advent of the L2s and the EVM compatible chains would siphon away value from the chain. I think that the thesis would be additive. And so going to proof of stake wasn't going to be a problem, right? Because the entire ecosystem would feed itself. But it's actually been extractive. It's been a siphon. It has diverted value from the main chain. So now let's say that's true, it's actually quite a almost heretical statement to say they shouldn't have moved away from proof of work. But it's hard to look at the chart and it's hard to look at, and if you talk about game incentives, look, we don't live in an altruistic world, guys, and you can't just force altruism on people. People participate in network-based games based on economics. And if economics aren't there and they're not sound and they're not sustainable and durable and well-designed, people are going to go find it somewhere else. And that's what they're doing right now, is they are finding it somewhere else. Thus, ETH is hanging out going, well, all the actions happening on L2 our daily active users are way down because they're all over here and they're in the ecosystem, but that activity is not accruing value to the chain. So numbers not going up. So then holders and stakers are exiting their positions, which is driving price down. And then at some point you have a huge existential house of cards that just falls over on itself, right? So you have to, and I agree with you that they're focusing now on, well, what are the fundamental drivers of this network ecosystem state that we need to support and grow? And what are the value accrual mechanisms that are going to keep this value closer to the main chain? Because, you know, Ethereum really is the only decentralized blockchain that we have when it comes to smart contracts. So if we want to protect decentralization in a pure form, we should care about Ethereum surviving.
Oh, absolutely. And
The other chains don't have it, and it's not a dig. It's just not how they were designed.
right.
And adding that feature later on, I'm not sure is so easy. There's plenty of people who've tried to do it, and it's not so easy.
Well, here we are talking about the plus and minuses of Ethereum, but this week we've also been hearing about Ethereum stablecoin market exploding, smashing the $124 billion mark and making up over half of all stablecoin liquidity worldwide. So we talked about Bitcoin being the belle of the ball for crypto state reserves. And now here we see Ethereum really coming up quietly as stabilizing a lot of the interactions that are happening right now. What do you think about this, John? Because we just Pectra upgrade, good and bad, but here we are seeing this other role that Ethereum is playing that is now the talk of the town for the United States, with all the potential stablecoin launches coming from banks and other exchanges.
Well, I think stablecoins are basically the next evolution of what we've already done in digital fiat. Right. So the number on the screen of your computer that shows your bank balance is already digital, but it doesn't actually exist in like a unit form. It's just numbers on some sort of ledger. So I think stable coins and settlement of payments and all sorts of things, when you talk about the use case around credit cards or just payment processing in general, or just the way the money moves around markets, both domestically and internationally, I think stable coins are an obvious thing. Some people would say that is the killer use case. I find them to be just a nice, sort of more clean, transparent tool for things that we already do. And there's definitely some DeFi games that have been created out of stables that are interesting. At the same time, I think legislatively, again, it's breaking the seal. I think you got to get the quick wins. So in talking with the president's Council on Digital Assets and the SEC, and just where people are putting their efforts, stablecoins are an easy win, right? Because there's not a lot of contention around why they should be legitimized. They obviously work, but it is, depending on who you ask and whether or not they like it, it is a validation for crypto in general. And so breaking that seal and like getting in where people are used to having interaction with crypto in some capacity is the path to mass adoption. So it is absolutely inevitable that it's going to pass the legislative session. I don't see any particular way that it's going to not pass. And then we'll see what comes next. I think it's, in terms of the long game, it's a really important step. It's not that interesting to me in terms of the actual application of it. I use stable coins and it's fine, but it doesn't change the fundamental fabric of societal interaction with much yet, but it's paving the way for that.
When I look at the scale of what's happening and what's growing, pay attention to big numbers. And what do I mean by that? So Tether right now, just in the market, has like roughly 52% of the stablecoin market. And how much money did they make in 2024? Roughly $13 billion in profit. So when you see numbers like that and you see the scale of where things are coming, people are paying attention. So there's a reason that Ripple is trying to purchase USDC Circle right now, because they see what's coming. They see how stablecoins have a path to not only being legitimate, as John said, but as a way to make very steady, consistent money. There's a reason that banks make so much money through their lending and exchanges and everything else. And so the more that can be legitimized and have other things with it, people want a piece of that pie. And so I'm not shocked by this news. I think we're going to see even more stablecoin players come into this in space. There are already a lot trying to come in right now, but I think that the stablecoin market will continue to appreciate as all of the crypto market continues to appreciate.
Agreed.
And is it a win for Ethereum? Right?
Yeah. Oh yeah,
Yes.
It's a big win for Ethereum. ERC20 based stablecoins are the thing, right? So it's a big win for Ethereum. The government here in the United States are paying attention closely to the markets and what are the other big wins or easy, quick wins that they can pump into what they're calling the digital golden age. Last week on Monday, we met with the SEC to propose a safe harbor for digital cooperatives or DAOs that would give them the ability to form capital, issue tokens, and sort of experiment through a safe harbor or some sort of sandbox environment. We probably have the most crypto-friendly administration in the history of anything. It's a we'll see kind of situation right now because there's words and then there's verbs. So we're very eagerly anticipating some sort of movement there. We did meet with the President's Council on Digital Assets last month as well, and was very well received on behalf of Opolis and Etherealize and Launch Legal and a bunch of other players that we brought with us, Consensus, to actually make Ethereum advocacy pitch on why Ethereum is so important to the objectives of the administration. And so there's a lot happening in transition. And what's next is we're going to see a whole advent of what I think are real world use cases bridging the gap into crypto and cryptoizing themselves. We're going to see a lot more fundamentals like revenue and profits being discussed inside the crypto blockchain community. And then once that happens, and they said the internet's going to eat the world, well, I think blockchains are going to eat the world eventually. And you're going to see all sorts of new economic games and opportunities for people to earn, to save, to borrow, to participate economically, socially on chain. And I think this is important pruning that we've had to do in the industry to do the learnings that are going to create more sustainable, durable, long-term outcomes.
Yeah, I think all of that's really awesome. Congrats on being able to talk to the ESC and all these others on what's to come, and also just getting around all the variabilities around how do we move blockchain forward, not just here in the States, but internationally. And as things become way more clear here, it's going to be the trend that then continues everywhere else. So I think that part's awesome. But you guys have a lot of exciting things going on. So John, really appreciate you spending some time with us.
All right. Well, we covered New Hampshire having the first state crypto reserve, Ethereum's stablecoin market, and the Pectra upgrade. And of course, we heard from John Paller joining us with his perspectives on how Ethereum is really getting a spotlight in many ways through your advocacy efforts in Washington. We don't want to see Ethereum left out of the conversation, right? So thanks for joining us, and we appreciate it. I'm January here with Richard. Stay curious, keep pushing boundaries, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss what's next on The Edge of Show.